Hey team, welcome back to another great episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader Podcast. This is your host, Mark Jewell, and today I am joined again by my counterpart colleague, our senior success coach here at the Momentum Company, Mr. John Anderson. Welcome back to the show, John.
Glad to be back. I'm excited to continue our conversation from the other day.
Yeah, absolutely. So, guys, the way that we're doing this now, what I'm about, it should be every Thursday as you're listening to the show. We upload shows on Mondays and Thursdays that are hitting your downloads, that we're posting on LinkedIn, that we're posting in the social media channels and so forth. The shows go live on Mondays and Thursdays. For the foreseeable future, your Monday shows are going to be our interview shows where we're interviewing leaders from around the industry. Over the last couple of years, I have interviewed something like 125 leaders from around agribusiness. And I'm not running out of them necessarily, but we're also getting feedback around what's getting downloaded, what are people paying attention to the most. And we're also looking into like, what does intention really look like? And it's one thing to kind of talk about it, but it's another thing to actually start to really hone in and design curriculum around like, how do we actually go and do it? So part of the mission of this show is to get the conversation, and this is what we've been doing. The main mission of the show has been to get the conversation about intentional leadership in the earbuds and truck speakers of people like you that are listening right now. The intentional leaders or the wannabe intentional leaders from across the ag industry. The more interviews I've done, the more I've realized over time is that we actually have quite a few people out here, the majority, in fact, that are not leading as intentionally as they could. And we know intuitively, inherently, we know that we need to be more intentional. And I'm here to just make a stand and take a claim or make the claim that we need to do a better job of it all around. Period. End of story. I'm just hearing way too many our coaching programs, our Thriving Leader program that John and I will talk more about today, in sales conversations that I'm having with prospective clients of the Momentum Company. I'm just hearing way too many stories, and John hears them too as a coach on the backside, working with your employees about leaders who think they're being intentional, but they're not. They're just unfortunately not. And so this is something that we're taking a stand for. We're just saying, we're not just saying, we are saying at this stage of the game, it's 2025, right? The information is out there. The courses are out there. The ability is out there. What's not happening is people are what's not happening is people are not sitting down to create the space and the time to really do what's required to be intentional. So in our last episode, John talked about a few things that we see, or that he sees, leaders of the people that we're coaching, that they're making, that are costing them time, money, peace, and sleep. Right. So these are the things that are costing the leaders of the people who we're coaching. So this is the CEOs, the vice presidents, the sales leaders, the regional managers, the location managers, et cetera. These are mistakes that those types of people are making that are costing them time, money, peace, and sleep. And we're here to get you that back. Okay. So we're going to review real quickly the 3 things from last time, and then we're going to jump into 3 more things and complete this list on this episode here today. So John, if I remember right, we talked about setting clear expectations. That's one of the big things that most people miss.
Yes.
Right. Giving clear direction.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's one of the big things. So setting expectations, go back to the episode from a week ago. If you guys missed this and didn't get this, because you want to make sure you get it, there's a lot of gold in there. So we don't set clear expectations. We don't give people clear direction. And what was the third one? We don't make time for the right kind of conversations.
Right. To really check in and build that relationship with our folks.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah.
All right. So those are the first 3. John, let's get into it, man. What's the first one today?
Yeah. So the first one, and they all kind of layer into each other, right? So none of these are like really separate on their own. They're all kind of build off of each other and interwoven and things like that. So some of it's going to be a little bit repeat, a little bit redundant, but but they're super important. So the next one that I was thinking about, and that I come up with pretty often, that I hear, and it's not actually the folks telling me this, like directly telling me this, It's what I sense when I'm talking to them. It's the thing that like their inner soul is screaming, but they're not really talking about it because they really don't even know what they want sometimes, right?
Yeah.
But they can tell you that they want this for the rest of their team, but they don't like they won't come out and say it, and that's really a lot of folks want to be held accountable. And I've had tons of conversations about folks that, oh, my leader doesn't hold my coworkers accountable to anything, right? And there's that, but there's also like, I don't want to admit that I actually want to be held accountable for some things too. Okay. And I know this is kind of a weird, it's almost weird to say that people want to be held accountable, but there's actually some peace in it. Okay. And maybe the reason why I pick it up, because it is like such a, it's like an underlining call or a subconscious call. The reason I think I pick up on it quite a bit is because I see it when I'm working horses. Right. So like when I'm not coaching, I'm working horses.
Right.
And I think working horses is one of the biggest, or like um, one of the coolest things that you can do to develop your leadership. And so what does horses have to do with holding people accountable? Okay. Well, horses learn by pressure and release. Right. So you give them pressure, you give them pressure, you give them pressure until they do the thing, and then you release the pressure. Okay. So horses will actually naturally seek pressure so that they can have the release. But if you don't give them that pressure, meaning the accountability, they actually become miserable. And then they kind of fight with you. They twitch their tail, they move their head, and it looks like you have a very miserable horse because they're fighting because they want that feedback. They want that feedback of, am I actually doing it right or not? Right. And it goes along the lines with expectations and setting clear directions and having a conversation with your folks. Right. We have to have those things in order to hold somebody accountable. But people are naturally seeking, whether they admit it or not, or they even know it or not. They're seeking that release, or they're seeking that pressure so they can get the release of pressure. Because what happens, what I've seen is they're so stressed out on trying to figure out, am I doing this right? I don't know. So they want that accountability, right? Even if it's a little bit of a correction.
Yeah.
So that they know, okay, I'm not doing it right, or I am doing it right. And then all of a sudden now they have the release of that pressure, the release of stress in this case. Is this making sense, Mark?
You may have just said something that I've never heard anybody else say around accountability, and I think you specifically need to start creating more content around this, and maybe write a course about how to hold people accountable, because you just said something I've never heard anybody say in this way, and I've never heard you say it in this way, and I've known you for almost a decade. So we seek the pressure so that we can experience the release of the pressure. And it's that reward, it's that internal wiring mechanism that seeks reward for doing the thing, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, I guess whatever. I mean, whatever. I was just putting a hose away the other day, and I'm thinking about, so when that hose is attached to the house, right, it gives the water structure, right, and I can move the water somewhere useful. But if I just turn on the hose at the side of the house or the side of the barn, it just goes all over the ground and goes out of next to my foundation, right? It doesn't actually go anywhere. It doesn't have direction. It needs the accountability of where to go. So this is kind of tied to setting the direction from our last episode, right?
Yep.
Where we talk about giving people clear direction, helping them know what to do, where to go, how to pursue the goals, etc. But what you're talking about here is, I mean, along the way is like, sometimes I just need accountability. Like, I'm naturally not a very organized human being. Okay. However, I like to keep my wife happy. Therefore, I focus and on an ever increasing level over time, the longer we're married, the more I learn what torques are off and what doesn't. And there's accountability there,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I just pay attention. I'm like, hey man, like just finally, okay, stop taking your shoes off when you come in the house. That's probably gross to some people, but I didn't grow up in a house where we did that. Right. And so, now the shoes are coming off more often. I'm not going to say I nail that one 1,000%, but the shoes are coming off at the door more often. Right. I'm not wearing shoes
Yes.
right now, and I'm in my house in the podcast studio. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, that would be an example of like, there's accountability, but I know like, because there is that pressure. Okay. There's the pressure. I know if she sees me, she's going to say something.
Mm.
Right. So there's the accountability. So then I do the behavior, and she doesn't have to reward me. She doesn't have to say anything. You should just take your stupid shoes off, you big knucklehead. Right. I mean,
Yep. Yep.
it's common sense. You should, that you should do this because you don't want to bring that dirt in from the outside. But it's the, like, now the pressure is off because I did the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And there's reward in that for me.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
And you could just see it like if you're a parent, you can see it
Yeah.
with kids how
Yeah.
they will create pressure themselves just so they can have the release of pressure sometimes.
Yeah.
Right. It's I was well, it's so a couple different quick examples. I was working with a young sales folk, a gentleman over the past year,
Mm-hmm.
and really a new sales guy doesn't really know what he's doing. He didn't have a whole lot of clear direction or expectation,
Yeah.
so he was just kind of floating around, and he never got that feedback. Well, he was just starving for it. He was starving for the accountability to say, hey, just like throw me in the fire a little bit, but also like give me that release when I'm doing a good job.
Mm.
Right. And he was miserable. Right. Until we started coaching him into like, hey, we said the last episode, you have to lead up. So you have to go to your boss and tell him what you need. Right. You got to be clear with him. You got to speak clearly. You have to set clear expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But then also we get to talk with his leader, his manager, and say, hey, you also have to set clear expectations, right? So it's a two-way street. And
Yes.
that's the power that you and I have, or not the power that you and I have, but the cool unique situation that we're in is we get to talk to both parties, right? And help them
Mm-hmm.
come together to
Yeah.
set that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, 100. Well, it's one of the benefits of what we do with our Thriving Leader program, because we coach we coach the employees. That's the bulk of who we get to work with. We do executive coaching too, and all those kinds of things. That's a different side of the business. But the bulk of the people, like this last year, we had something like 250 people in our coaching programs at any given time. So we're seeing a lot of people and what they're going through, where they're experiencing clear direction or lack of it, or clear expectations or lack of it, or great relationships with their managers or not. And the unfortunate thing, guys, I wish it was all sunshine and roses and this was a great story, but John and I would be out of the job. And I guess that would be a good thing. Our mission would be accomplished. We could go create something new, but we're not. Like, there's so much work for us because you guys are so busy doing everything that you're doing every day. You just have so much. You leaders, you managers, you people managers, so much on your plate. And so little of it is around intentionally setting clear expectations, giving direction, holding people accountable, right? Because your boss is giving you, or the business itself is just giving you lots of other stresses. And so your fragmented focus doesn't get the level of attention. Like when John's working a horse, he's working one horse at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, right? I mean, I'm guessing you're
Mm-hmm.
not working multiple horses in the pen. Otherwise, you get a lot of mixed feelings from different
Very hard to
people.
ride two horses at
Yeah.
once.
So anyway, I mean, it's but when your focus is fragmented, like it often is, and this is one of the biggest challenges that we see with our managers that we coach, that we have in our programs, or that we get to talk to, is
Mm-hmm.
that challenge. And so it's one of the things that we offer. So we go in, we coach the employees, but then we spend an hour every month with the managers who have enrolled them, and we're coaching them
Mm-hmm.
on this conversation that we're having right here. Hey, here's what we're seeing. This is the real-time feedback. Love it or hate it, but this is the feedback that your people are giving us, because your people tell us things they don't tell you. We try to keep that as confidential as possible. So we don't name names. We don't say, who said what necessarily. It's not about that. Again, unless somebody's doing something unethical, but we say, hey, like, you need to have these types of conversations with your people more often.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's
Yep.
good. Very, very good. By the way, just before we move on, you guys should be listening to this before February 21st if you downloaded it right away. February 21 is the downline. February 21, 2025 is the download is the deadline of registration for our upcoming event, which is in Nashville, March 18th and 19th. So you guys definitely need to be there. Come in on St. Patty's Day. Come in the night before. Stay sober. I know that's not a great sales pitch, but it's going to benefit you because 6 a.m. is going to come early for the start of our Thriving Leader program. It's a great program.
Mm-hmm.
We've run this thing over 140 times. I think we're going to get to probably 155 this year, probably ish 150, 155 this year in our repetitions. We do a lot of them, and you should be there. So head over to themomentumcompany.com and sign up right now. Just go to the programs that we offer, click on the book a call, or go to the registration page and get yourself into the program. You can also just email me directly. I will get you in. It's Mark, very simple, MARK at themomentumcompany.com. All right, John, what's the next one on our list?
Yeah, so the next one ties into the one we just talked about. And so I'm going to introduce it like this. We're talking horses today, apparently. But the other day I was in this arena working a horse, and I like to test my horses to see how good of a handle that I have on them, how good of a leader I am, and so what I'll do sometimes is I'll just drop the reins. Like we all know what reins are, right? I'll drop the reins, and then I'll just use like my foot cues to see if I can control the horse or dictate the direction. And that's really what we're not really trying to control the horse. We're trying to dictate the direction and speed. That's really all what training horses is about. No different than training people, right? Or leading people. Direction and speed. We talked about setting clear direction. But anyways, so I was working this horse, and she was going pretty good. And then until I asked her to go into like a lope, which is like a run, right? A controlled run. Yeah. And we're doing pretty good. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to lope circles and figure eights.
Okay.
I've got the reins. They're laying on her neck. I've got my hands on my hips. My wife is videotaping this because it's a really cool marketing thing to sell the horse, blah, 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 blah. Well, all of a sudden I ask her to go to a lope, and she just kind of like keeps picking up the speed and keeps picking up the speed and keeps picking up the speed to the point where I'm like, okay, we're out of control. Yeah. And her head, like you can tell a nervous horse if their head goes way up. Okay. And her head is way up, and she's kind of like bolting around this arena. And it's like 120 by 100 foot arena. So it's a pretty good size arena, and we're just going. And I'm like, okay, I got to grab the reins. Okay. Cause she was not listening to me. Well, so I share this example, right? Because it's my job when I'm sitting on the saddle to notice, okay, she's a little nervous. Okay. She's not responding. She's maybe a little bit overwhelmed with what's going on. She's not ready for this. Okay. So one of the biggest challenges that I see, or one of the biggest things that people are screaming out for their leaders to do, is to be a mentor and a coach. And I know that's such a weird analogy for this, right? But when I'm sitting on that horse, I've got to read her, right? By looking at her head position, her ears, her body, the swish of her tail, all the things. And then in that moment, I need to coach her. Right. So like I see that she's kind of overwhelmed. So instead of just kind of trying to fight it, what I do is I just lightly pick up on the reins, just so she has, and the reins aren't to control the horse. The reins are to guide the horse. Right. So I just lightly pick up on her, and all of a sudden, like, her head goes down, her tail quits swishing. She slows down to a controllable speed. And because now I've become like a coach. So now I'm just coaching her a little bit, like, slow down. It's okay. Right. I got you back now. Right. So my I guess my fifth point here is leaders are not typically not taking the time to slow down, to coach and mentor their folks, right? To really see them and give them that little bit of guidance to have those conversations, right? and kind of catch them. Like we can push them, right? Like it's good as a coach to push. And there's a time to when we push and to see what they're capable of, but we also have to pay attention to them, check in on them, like, all right, okay, we're go a little too fast, right? And then it's just pick up the reins a little bit and just like collect them a little bit. Maybe say a few things, maybe ask them a few questions, check in on them, give them a little bit of advice, right? And just be there for them so that their heads aren't like up, their eyeballs aren't like wide open, and they're just like they're drinking from a fire hose. Sometimes we got to notice that and then just coach them.
Come on. The reins are not there to control, they're there to guide.
Yes.
That is, I'm sorry, man. I'm not sorry, but you are just dropping some bombs in this thing here today. Like, maybe we're in an echo chamber and we just like to hear some of the stuff that we talk about. But again, I've never heard that analogy specifically. I've heard you use a lot of horse analogies, by the way. Right? I've never heard that one. The reins are there not to control; they're there to guide. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and we have and by the way, the reins are not like the. I'm thinking about like the we're issuing sanctions on different countries around the world that are not getting on board with Trump right now, which is cool. I'm in favor of it, but it's like those are global reigns, right? Now, we often though the mistake I see people making along this lines is when they need to pull the reins, they issue sanctions on their employees, right? So we take responsibility away, we take customers away. Because like, well, that's just too hard for you. I'm going to go do it. Or we step in and do it for them, right? Which is not a sanction, but in a way it is, because you now have shortcutted that person's ability to learn and fail, or to fail and learn along the way, right? And because that sometimes that's what coaching and mentoring is. You know, like I'm watching my third grade son go out and play basketball. He's just finished up his season last night. He's on a terrible team, and he has lots of coaching. So this kid is the most privileged kid in the world, in terms of like. So his mom works for the University of North Carolina. She happens to teach one of the former national champion Iowa Hawkeye players, and she's one of his mom's students. So she pays her a little fee every Wednesday, and she comes over to his mom's house and they shoot hoops. And she like gives him coaching.
Oh, that's cool.
Right. So he's working with a national champion basketball player, you know, from that one. I mean, the girl who was Gabby. I can't remember her last name. Gabby. She played with Caitlin Clark.
Oh yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's one of his coaches. Right. And I played a little basketball too, you know, so we'll go out and play a little basketball. And then he's got practice, you know, once or twice a week. And then the game shows up on Saturday, and you watch a kid go out there. You're just like, oh my gosh, we've invested all this time and money. How could he be I mean, not like he's terrible, but it's like the whole when you get all 5 kids that are all at different abilities, and it's boys and girls, it's just a complete show. You know what I mean? And you know what kind of show I'm talking about, right? So it's just interesting to see, and that sometimes that's. But I mean, athletics are a great analogy, because as the coach, you do everything you can to prep your team. You get in shape, you train fitness, right? You train for stamina, and then you train on how to run the plays and how to execute the plays and all the skill sets that go into it. And then Friday night shows up and you send your guys out onto the field to go do the thing. And you're just like, sometimes you just put your arms in the air like, how does that happen? You know?
Yes.
And so, you know, we need those reins, right? And the reins can only be there if you've done the step, you know, that we talked about in the last show, which is making the time to build the relationship. Because if you don't have that good relationship with your employees, and now you start asking to pull back and say, hey, let's sit down and have a mentor conversation or a coaching conversation. Often that coaching conversation feels punitive. Right? It feels like I've done something wrong, because for most of us, for most of our lives, whether it was at home or in school, the only time you got feedback is when you did something wrong. Right? And so developing a coaching conversation along the way is really important. Having a coach along the way is really important. Quick little backstory where we got into coaching. I wrote a program, 15 years ago, called Managing Across Generations. Okay. And managing across generations was designed to help the baby boomers solve their millennial problems. And in that program, I'll give you it was a 2-hour program. I'll give you the real quick and dirty. We basically covered three things. There was a lot of things. We covered what makes different generations different. Okay, so what causes the makeup of the generation? So it helps them understand why millennials think different than baby boomers, and now you have all these other generations now, by the way, and why they think different than we do as millennials or Xers, right? And so, and there's still a few boomers kicking around the industry too, so we'll include them. But everybody has just a little bit different background. The other two things that we talked about were the importance of coaching and feedback. Coaching and feedback. I said this is going to be one of the most important things you need to do specifically for your millennial people, and now even more so for the younger generations, because for those people that are in the workplace today, 40 and under, for the most part, and unless they just grew up rural or in a little bit more of a lot of people grew up with a lot more independence on the farm, but most people, for most people, our parents knew where we were every hour of the day. If you're in that 40 and under category. Now you go 40 and over, you find a lot more people that were kind of just told to go do stuff, or that were left alone to go make up their day. And you and I kind of fall into that weird category where we're kind of on the cusp. You're in your late 30s, I'm in my early 40s, but we had a lot of freedom. My parents didn't know where I was all the time. Man,
Same.
like I've got we've got 23, 21, 19, 17, 15-year-old and a 9-year-old, and I know where all of them are right now. You know what I'm saying? So like we raise kids different, and because of that, what happens is they kind of lose that sense of independence and that ability to go figure it out on their own.
Mm-hmm.
So when you and I were out and working a field, or if we were just out horsing around with our friends, like we had time to break something, screw something up, and then find a way to cover our ass before Dad found out. Right?
100%.
So you learn
we got really good at it.
Exactly. Like when you screw up as much as I did, like you get really good at, and what happened, there's a lot of cognitive development that happens within that. Okay. Mm-hmm. We have a whole generation of people that have never had that experience. Mm. They've never screwed something up and had to find a way to fix it without being told to, mm-hmm. or having somebody fix it for them or step in, right, and show them how. And sometimes there was just nobody there to show us how. Right. And mm-hmm. a lot of you, especially that are, older than John and I, will resonate with that. So my point with all this is, we've talked about the importance of coaching. We talked about the importance of feedback and like taking the time to give feedback, positive and negative. There's a ratio here, by the way. This was written in a book way back in the early 90s, that, your ratio for feedback should be 8-1, 8 positive to 1 constructive. So I share all that in this presentation. I get cornered by one of the managers at the end of this presentation. I was in Minot, North Dakota. It was February of 2013, and I'm in Minot, North Dakota. And this guy comes up to me, he says, "Hey, great presentation. You're a good speaker. Thanks for helping me understand generations. But listen, the stuff you're talking about, coaching and feedback, I don't have time." And I looked at him and I'm like, "What do you mean you don't have time?" And he says to me, I mean, not only do I got to manage these two young guys, and he points to these young guys sitting in the back of the conference room. It's like, not only do I got to manage them, I got 5 other people. I'm in charge of inventory for my location, and I got to go sell $5 million worth of crop inputs by myself. I don't have time for coaching and feedback. And that's when it hit me. I was like, what? Like that? Okay. Like I get it. Like I get he's under pressure. Right? He doesn't have time to sit down and think about all the things I'm sitting down and thinking about as it pertains to being a good coach. So I just said to him, I said, "What would you pay me to do that for you?" And that was the moment I went from being a speaker to being a coach, to starting a coaching company. And that was something, as the story goes, that was over 12,000 hours of coaching that between myself, you, and the rest of the team over the last decade plus that we've done as it pertains to coaching. So when John and I are talking about, hey, here's the 5 big mistakes that we see, like this is well grounded and well researched. We're not sitting here doing peer-reviewed studies, but we've heard some stories, right? And we've seen some things along the way. So
100%.
One of the benefits, with the Thriving Leader program, I know I keep pitching this thing. I just, I want people to get it. I want to get people in the room so that we can help. We've got the easiest way in the world this year for you guys to get in the room. It's the 5 for 5 and 25. You can bring 5 people for $5,000, no risk. That $5,000 will work as a credit to the coaching program. What we offer on the back of our 2-day Thriving Leader program is a year-long coaching program. You can outsource that coaching to John, myself, and the team. Outsource it, right? And we'll work with you to build a great coaching program for your team, for your organization. It is a slam dunk. And guys, we don't miss. Our net promoter scores coming off of our live events are 9.2 out of 10.
Yep.
So get to the room. All right, John, what's the third one?
All right. The third one for today, literally just having a conversation about this earlier this week with an individual, and not just with this individual, but a lot of the team that this individual is working with. And it's recognition and appreciation. I don't know how to set it up. I'm just going to say it: recognition and appreciation. So there's for a little bit of context, there's a great YouTube video out there. I believe it's by Mike Robbins. Right, he's an old or an ex professional baseball player. I think he was a pitcher or whatever, and he does a pretty good TED talk on this. Talks about it, but there was a study done, and I don't remember what the study was done, but it was 60% of folks left their job because they felt underappreciated and not recognized. Right. And what's interesting is I listened to that, I don't know, 6-7 years ago. And what's really interesting is now I see it. It's opened my eyes, and I see that a lot. I mean, we talk to a lot of folks in agriculture, right? A lot of co-ops, retail, all the things. One of the biggest problems that I see with those co-ops is retention, right? And finding good help. Okay. And one of the unfortunate but fortunate things that we get to do is sometimes we're there when folks are thinking about quitting. And I like that used to drive me nuts when I had a client that quit, because I took it really hard. It was like, oh no, that's on me.
We
all
take
the
it
things
personal because we feel like we lost it for our client.
Yes, right. But the thing is most of the time, like when we have those conversations, it's because they felt undervalued and not appreciated. They felt like just a number on the wall, a name on the wall or whatever, that their boss didn't care about them, never really spent time with them, never appreciated them. Like they'll give them all the money in the world. They'll give them all these raises. And it feels good for a couple weeks, couple months, but then all of a sudden it starts to wear like, I don't feel like I'm part of the team. I don't feel like my boss notices me or sees me, that doesn't treat me like a member of the team.
Yeah.
So that money only goes a certain way. And I want to like, there's a distinction between recognition and appreciation. Recognition is recognizing or acknowledging for a job well done. Like for sales, hey, good job. You got that customer. You landed that account. That's recognition, right? A pat on the back. And that, I believe, don't quote me on this, I believe if we recognize somebody in the workplace, we'll actually see a performance improvement by 23%, something close to that. Just by saying, hey, attaboy, right? Or giving somebody a high five.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Now, the difference between that and appreciating somebody is appreciating somebody is more about who they are as a person, like their character. Right. So it's not saying, hey, good job, you landed that account. It's more so like, hey, Mark, like I noticed how hard you worked on that account. Like not just asking the tough questions and showing up, but really doing your research, really extending yourself and putting yourself out there. It's more so about who they are as a person and calling that out. And the study shows is when we appreciate somebody, their increase in performance is something between 43 and 46% uptick.
43 to 46% increase in productivity.
Yeah.
Huh.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, that is
And
super wild.
we typically, like, money is important. Don't get me wrong. Like, I like to have money too, right? Like, it doesn't hurt, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes money isn't always the problem. Sometimes we have to go to work on, are we actually recognizing and appreciating our people? And
Mm-hmm.
more often than not, when somebody gets on a call, whether it's a group call or one-on-one call, and they're venting, it's because they did not feel appreciated
Yep.
or recognized
100%.
by their leader.
Right. I love that you've laid out the actual numbers in here, right?
Mm.
Research numbers showing we can get 23% bump by just recognizing we can get a 40% plus bump in productivity. I imagine that plays into engagement too. I don't have the books sitting here in front of me, right? But we can get an increase in engagement by just doing those two things, right? And if there was something else in your business that you could do um, that had that kind of a return, you would systematize it. You would do it every day. So my challenge to
Mm-hmm.
those of you listening is, what's your system for recognition and appreciation inside your business right now?
Mm-hmm.
Where are you at? That's what intentional leadership is. That's the execution of intentional leadership right there.
Which is, just think of this, Mark. Let's say, like, if we saw our people as an investment, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you could invest in something and get a 23% or a 46% um, increase,
Mm-hmm.
right? Return on investment
I put all my money in right now.
right now, right? Like Bitcoin, whatever it is, right?
Selling everything else. I'm putting it all right there.
Yeah. So why do we not do that? Knowing that if we just recognize and appreciate people, why do we not do that more often?
Yep.
And a lot of the times we in yes, so a lot of the times we'll give feedback
Mm-hmm.
on negative things,
Yep.
right? We'll correct people when they screwed up or whatever, but how often do we, like, when we catch them doing something good, when do we call it out?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you want to see good behaviors, reward good behaviors.
Yeah, man. Where your focus goes, your energy flows. That's what Tony Robbins says.
Yeah, I love it.
Right. Right. Where
Love
your
it.
focus goes, your energy flows. I mean, there'll always be times for correction, but so much of the other stuff that we talked about was really built around that. Right. And so everything kind of culminates with this whole recognition and appreciation piece that you're laying on us right now, which is great. So, John, this has been excellent. I want to give the audience two things to do right now. If you're on a leadership team, if you're leading a team, and you work with others, what you need to do right now is go schedule, like, take these two episodes that John and I have done. It's about an hour and 10 minutes of listening between the two episodes, maybe an hour 15, and just plan some time for your next team meeting or team retreat, and listen to them as a team. Listen to them as a team. What I'm going to say to you right now is, if you email me, Mark at themomentumcompany.com, I'm going to take these two episodes and I'm going to put together a little worksheet based on the 5 or 6 things that John has shared with us. Okay. I'm going to put together a worksheet, and if you email me, I'll email you back the worksheet so that you can have it and use this to work through your next team meeting, to just do an inventory. Are we setting clear expectations? Are we setting direction? Are we making the time for the right kind of conversations? And if we're not doing those 3 things in our culture, then your culture is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Just going to say that. So you got to do something about it. Are we doing what's required to hold people accountable? Okay. And as John said, people like it, right? We seek the pressure so that we can experience the release of the pressure. Remember that one. Okay. Do we know when to pull the reins as a team? And what are those reins inside our company? And are we recognizing and are we appreciating? Right? Do an inventory. Email me. I'm going to give you the worksheet, and you guys can go to work on it. Schedule some time for that at the next team meeting. Guys, thank you for listening to the episode. John, thanks for putting this all together for us. This has been phenomenal. Guys, we're going to be here every Thursday for the foreseeable future. John, myself, we're going to bring Christine into the conversation. We're going to be providing tons of great learning and content just like this that you guys can put to work inside your organizations. If you want to get the full meal deal all at once in one place and time, March 18th and 19th in Nashville, head to themomentumcompany.com. Get registered today. We'll see you guys next time.